Hi, thank you so much, Mafe. And hi, everybody. We are the Flourish content team, and today we are going to talk tips and tricks about visualizing sports and football coverage in particular. Today's focus is mainly the upcoming World Cup, for which we are super excited. And I assume that everybody who joined today's webinar is really looking forward to it as well. Today's session is going to be very, very Flourish example heavy. So just to summarize on Maf's introduction as well, if you feel that you really need to write down something or you didn't really catch how a certain example has been made, please don't worry. You're going to get a recording of today's session via email and on our YouTube and webinar page. We have so much ground to cover that I actually wouldn't keep us all here in this introductory slide. And I'm going to dive straight into today's session. But before we start, I really want to start today's webinar with some very good news, I hope, for everybody. And that's it, that we are introducing our brand new tournament chart here at Flourish. As you can imagine, an extremely highly requested template. Basically, everybody is always looking forward to it. Finding some very creative ways to create some sort of a tournament chart with it, other Flourish template that haven't probably been their purpose wasn't to kind of demonstrate this kind of a tournament chart, but here we are trying to help everybody with our brand new template. This template is launching on the 25th of November, which is just a few days after the World Cup has actually started. But of course, we are hoping that that's going to help you to kind of visualize a round of 16s up all the way to the finals. And this template is free to everybody, to all of our users. You can just make an account in Flourish if you haven't one already, and just use it, embed it, and do all kind of cool things with it. Usually, as a general practice, we always recommend subscribing to the newsletter to receive the latest news and template updates here at Flourish. We promise we don't bombard everybody with emails. We email no more than twice a month, so please do sign up. And with all that being said, I just want to start with a little bit of an introduction about different types of football data for the purpose of today's webinar, and just so we are all on kind of the same side when it comes to the terminology that I'm going to be using throughout this session. If you probably ask different data visualization experts that specialize in sports and tell them to define the different types of football and sports data you can find out in the wild or collect yourself, they will probably give you different answers to your question. But today we are going to be using this kind of an overview of football data that you can find and you can visualize. The three types of data that we're taking a look here are the box score, the metadata, and the tracking data. The box score data is basically the statistical summary of every game. This is what makes each game unique. And that could be everything from goals, from yellow and red cards given throughout the certain game, match duration, and things like that, which is basically very useful when it comes to doing any type of sports or football analysis. The metadata is probably a bit of self-explanatory type of data. Basically, its purpose is to provide context, both general and historical. And those are things like who is the host of this year's World Cup, for example, the participating teams. It could be everything from player information, such as their birthday, how tall are they, and things like that. And basically, this information just provides, this type of data just provides general information about the tournament or the season or the league that you're trying to visualize. And last but not least, the third type of data is the tracking data. This is basically the natural evolution to the box score. Basically, probably you might be aware with all the VAR technology that's currently being used in sport, which is like sensor, video motion, super improved technologies, basically, that really matter a lot to the football teams and the football, basically coaches, everybody who is involved in speculations, bets, odds, and things like that. And of course, this tracking type of data, just because it uses very expensive technology, sometimes it might be quite hard to find out in the wild. So for today's purposes of the webinar, we're actually going to focus on the box score and metadata, something that you can collect yourself if you wish to as well. But of course, just as a side note, basically, it's good to mention that one metric can fit into multiple data types, meaning that, for example, if I am trying to visualize how tall are the players, just as a general information, that could be a metadata. But if I actually compare them, that could be metadata in a box score context. This is just a little bit of an introduction in case you might be interested in more of the theoretical part of the football data visualization and sports data visualization generally, but I am going to finish with my theory part right here. And now, basically, all I want to say is that, of course, the data has multiple purposes. Some of those could be analytical, which basically would affect decision making. And here we're talking about real professional experts analyzing data, sports data, players' data, and etc. But for today's session, here at Flourish, we mainly focus on the communication part and the communication use of data visualization, meaning that we're always trying to provide ideas and tips and tricks on how to present data in a manner that's digestible and understandable for everybody, regardless of their data literacy skills. So this is what are we going to do in the next hour or so. I am starting with our first tip today, which is basically going to showcase how you can visualize goals and how to spot trends and patterns using our scatter plot. For those of you who might have seen our recent blog post about the World Cup, this scatter plot might be familiar to you, but if you see this for the first time, basically this chart here presents every goal of scored during the World Cup 2018 on a 90 plus minute timeline, because obviously not every game was 90 minutes on the dot. And the idea behind this chart type is this visualization is to basically see whether what some commentators were saying about the World Cup 2018 was true, which was, oh, we saw a lot of late goals this season. Lots of goals were scored during the second half. We see a second half trend, and etc. So if I can kind of focus on one very generic tip for someone who is like just starting with sports data visualization or with data visualization in general, that would be just to not be afraid to kind of be curious whether what someone says as a statement or as a fact is actually true, and just double check with the data if you can find it available, of course. And this is exactly what we did here. We heard this statement and we decided to visualize it. Now, the reason why we decided to choose a scatter plot in this particular situation was because, as you may or may not be aware, a scatter plot is a really good option when it comes to basically comparing two variables. And in this case, we're kind of comparing just the number of goals scored on a 9-minute timeline. You can always, this is actually a B-swarm visualization. And I am going to showcase how we created this chart and what makes it so special. To sum up, something that we are going to be doing right now is we're going to the Flourish app. We're going to choose a scatter plot starting point. We're going to use our grid charts facet, which is basically going to split our timeline into 3 halves. And we're going to customize our visualization so it looks very cool and nice. As you can see here, basically, we have our spreadsheet, which showcases our some metadata, which is the date, who scored it, who scored the goal, when it was scored, what was the match, and things like that. We also have the minute in which the goal was scored, the period, meaning whether it was first half, second half, or after the 90th minute, and some comments, which we can use to color by. To get started, I'm just going to download my visualization, my CSV file. And I'm gonna go straight to my Flourish app. Here, by clicking New Visualization, I am going down to my scatter plot. And here in the data, I'm just gonna erase the blueprint, that the starting point that we have used, and I'm gonna drag and drop my current spreadsheet that I just downloaded. Basically, for those of you who are avid Flourish users, you might be aware that we recently, I think a couple of months ago, we launched this super exciting new setting in some of our Flourish templates called automated column selection. What this feature does is that basically it interprets every single column in your data set and it assigns it a certain data type. And once it has done this task, basically, then it tries to guess how your columns in your dataset should be used within the template that you have selected. And of course, here you can see that it tried to kind of bind some of my columns within the scatter plot, meaning that here it bound the groups for my y-axis and the period as my x-axis. Of course, we don't want this. In fact, what we want in this particular visualization is quite different. We want every single of our points to be positioned within a single line, meaning that basically we don't need a y-axis at all. And if I leave the y-axis blank, and instead of having my period as my x-axis, I just bind my minute column, you will notice that this is exactly what we've done here. Basically, all of our points are now positioned on a single line. I don't personally find this view particularly useful. And instead, what am I going to do is I'm going to enable the bee swarm mode of the scatter plot. Basically, for those of you who might not be aware of this setting, whenever you have one numerical and one categorical axis in the scatter plot, in this case, we have one numerical x-axis and non-existent y-axis, so it does still work. We can enable our bee swarm, which basically allows us to kind of like distribute every single entry of in our dataset into a more visible format, so we can all see what is going on in our chart. So dots are not overlapping. And as you can see here, this is perfectly fine, I guess. If you're in a rush, perhaps this kind of a bee swarm might work to see the distribution, whether the 50th minute saw more goals and things like that. But what I want actually is I want every single dot, every single goal that was scored on the 91 minute to not be kind of interrupted by other dots. And in order for me to achieve this, I need to make sure that I have enough width. But of course, when you embed a visualization or anything like this, you don't have 1500 pixels all the time and things like this. So in order for us to kind of cheat the extra space, this is why we're splitting our timeline into a grid of charts. I'm going to do this by using, as mentioned, my period here. I'm just going to bind column G. And as you saw here, now basically what this setting does is it splits our three grid of charts into, it basically creates three different visualizations within the same view. But this is kind of useless because at the moment we're all using the same x-axis, which is kind of, you know, useless, as I mentioned. So what I can do is basically I can just go to our x-axis and disable the matching x-axis across my grid of charts. As you can see now, basically the over 90th minute starts from 90 minutes onwards. The second half starts from 45th minute up until the 90th. And the first half starts from the 0 to 50 because there is sometimes some sort of halftime after the first half. However, basically, I still don't think that this is particularly useful. So I'm just going to go ahead and instead of having the three split visualizations, one next to each other, I can select a fixed number of columns in my grid, and I can choose one grid per row, basically, so it has its own space. And now you see that they're much more organized in its look. However, basically, this is still kind of weird. So under sizing mode, you can always choose a different aspect ratio. Just to let you know again, please be mindful that you're gonna be having the recording and everything. So I hope nobody just sits down and take notes. Generically, what you can do here is just make sure that the minute axis title is not being repeated, just to avoid tautology, basically. In one way or another, this is kind of the very basic way of our scatter plot that we are seeing on our presentation. However, obviously, this is very inaccessible in terms of how big our dots are. So in order for me to change this, all I'm going to do is I'm just gonna increase the size of my dots to something like 450. This kind of basically still makes this a little bit weird. I'm not particularly happy with that. So instead, maybe I can just reduce it to 420. And now you see that every single dot is being organized on its own. The good part is that regardless of whether I'm looking at this visualization on mobile or on a tablet with, the visualization looks good. Last but not least, we're going into the customization part now. Basically, as you can see here, our x-axis is a little bit vague at the moment. So what we can do is we can add a suffix to make sure that our readers know that they're looking at minute timeline from the first view. We can enable the grid lines, or maybe no, it's up to you and really up to your branding guidelines. Under ticks and labels, this is quite contrary to what we generally suggest in Flourish. We always say that x-axis and axis ticks in general should be as spare as possible to avoid overcrowding your chart. But in this case, we really do need every minute matters. So in this case, instead of having of just 5 ticks per axis, what I want is having something like 18. Just maybe I'm just gonna increase make the angle 0, just so we can actually see that every minute is important, and we basically see that let's say the 62nd minute saw more goals than the 61st, and things like that. To finish up with this scatter plot, I am just going to show you one last thing, and those are highlights on our axes. Basically, the way you can do this is to just enable these settings. And here, for example, I don't know if you remember, but we've kind of colored our extra time and 90 minutes. So what I can do here is I can just use the range highlights, because I want my whole background to be colored. And I'm going to follow this kind of this format here. So that's going to be my label, but I don't want a label. So I'm just going to move on straight to the dates. In our case, this is the 90th minute up to 160 minutes. So I'm just going to put like that. And I'm going to choose my color red. And as you can see here, if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that now our background is red. But you can see that here we're catching this 90 minutes as well, which is part of the regular game, no extra time. So in order for us to avoid that, what we can do is we can specify our grid of charts by simply providing our title. I can try and copy and paste this. And once I have specified my grid of chart, you can see that the 90th minute here is blank as usual. I am mindful of our time, so of course I would love to show you different how to style your colors, how to change the opacity and things like that. But if anybody is interested to learn more about the aesthetic part of our chart, please do let us know in the chat, and we can move on. I can answer all questions at the end of our session. To finish off this kind of analytical part of how you can visualize different trends and patterns, we have provided a couple of examples that we have taken from our previous blog post and previous football coverage. Basically, here on the left, you can see our radar plot, radar chart, which compares the top scorers of each qualified team during the Euros in 2020. And if I open our blog post, you can see multiple different visualizations, but basically this one in particular shows an easy way for you to compare players across multiple variables. So this might be one good example to keep in mind. And we have another one, which is a traditional column chart. Sometimes a simple line or a bar chart might be the best option out there. In this situation here, for example, we are comparing how many of the national team players are actually playing at home during regular season. which in the case of Senegal and Sweden in 2018 was 0. We can see that they had absolutely no local league players and everybody played abroad. In comparison, England, for example, played at home. All of England's players played in a local league. And sometimes all you need is just a little bit of customization of a generic Flourish chart, such as a stacked column chart. You can add it into a story, so it kind of like changes between different views, things like that. And we're going to go into these customization things at the end of our in our last tip. But yeah, this is another option. Last but not least, yet another exciting news here from Flourish. Literally a few days ago, we launched another template, and that's our gauge template. Just in time for the midterm elections that are actually starting today, but also here you can see that my colleagues created a very cool visualization that basically showcases how you can use our gauge template for sports as well. And even things like odds and bets could be easily visualized with the gauge template. It's very easy, very fun to use, and it's free for all of our users. So please read some more about our gauge template here in our blog. Before I move on, I'm just gonna stop for a second, and Mafe, if you just let me know if there's some questions in the chat.
So far, so good.
All good? Okay, perfect, amazing. I then would lose no time and I am going to continue with our second part of the session, which is how to visualize metadata. But before we get started, I just have a little quiz for you. Basically, here on the right, you can see I created a very short quiz with only 3 questions. And if you are feeling inspired, you would like to participate in this quiz, please do give your answers in the chat just to test your World Cup knowledge. So Mafe, I would like some assistance here if possible. But I'm just going to ask the questions, ask the answers. Please feel free to participate. If not, well, it's okay. You're going to find out the answer anyway. Starting with first question, which is the only team to play in every World Cup tournament? You can also participate, Mafe, in this game as well. Whether it's Germany, Brazil, Mexico, or France, just shout your bet.
Okay, we have a 50-50 split. Some people say Germany, some people say Brazil.
Okay. Which one do you want to go for?
Maybe we'll wait a second and see. Oh, we have a third option for Brazil again. So
okay.
Brazil.
Brazil it is. Okay, let's submit and see. It is correct. Yay! I guess that was just for, starting the quiz. Now a little bit more complicated. How many teams do you all think that have won the World Cup as of 2018? We can choose between 5 and 15 countries that have won ever since the beginning of the World Cup tournament, which was 1930.
We have a 9. So we have a 7, 8, and 9.
7, 8, and 9. Okay. Well, I mean, 2 9s. Is it? Okay. I'm just gonna move on. I'm gonna choose 9, but I am really sorry. The real answer is indeed 8. Last question. That could be you can just guess it. Which team do you think scored the first ever goal in the World Cup history? That was in 1930. That's a hint. And it could be the US, Uruguay, France, or Brazil.
People are saying Uruguay.
Uruguay? Okay. I mean, it makes sense because the first World Cup was based in Uruguay. But the answer is actually France. Lucien Laurent, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name correctly, was the first ever World Cup goal scorer, and he scored on 13th of July 1930 and basically wrote history. This is basically one of a very easy and very simple and fun ways to visualize metadata. As we discussed, this is some general context data that just provides some sort of engagement and general overview of your readers. And this quiz took me literally 5 minutes to create. So this is one very cool thing. And if you've never started with Flourish, another very cool template to kind of play around with and get to know the tool. basically, I was supposed to have a little chart. Aha, here it is. The idea of our so-called Flourish content-based templates, such as the quiz, as we just saw, is to provide our users with a chance to visualize things in a very interactive and animated way that are not necessarily numerical data. And we have many, many different options. We basically have everything from cards, which are we going to see in a second, to the quiz that you just experienced. We have things like photo slider, word clouds, and all of these kind of things. You can just like glance through. Oh yeah, maybe it's a good one to mention the number ticker and countdown as well, which here, for example, we see very clearly when is the World Cup starting. Of course, these different content-based templates work with different types of data, and probably you wouldn't go for a text annotator that just annotates text when you are creating football coverage, but you never know. Maybe you can be creative. Maybe you can get some commentator speeches and things like that, and just visualize things in different ways. But actually, to be very real, we don't think that every single content-based template is working within the sports world. Instead, I believe that basically these content-based templates would be the best way to go about sports coverage, which are actually the cards, the quiz that we just saw, the timeline, which is a premium template, and as mentioned, the countdown and number ticker. And of course, if you're having metadata, that doesn't necessarily mean that you always need to go to some template that's something like a card. Of course, you can use things like maps and projection maps and bubble charts as well. But if these speak nothing to you, don't worry, we're just going to see some examples. Here are our cards template. This is yet again basically a simple visualization that we created for the Euro. And basically what we see here is the top scorers of each qualified team. And once you hover, you will see some more information about each player. That could be things like biography, could be number of goals. And here, for example, we've also added 2 images to represent the red cards and yellow cards, and how many were there. So in order to achieve this, basically, you only need a little bit of customization of our template. But here in this help doc, we have actually used exactly the same example that I'm just showing. So if you would like to recreate this very same visualization, please just look at this help doc and follow these 4 or 5 steps, and you're gonna have it. Very useful, and in my opinion, a very nice idea to basically have every single player at a glance, whether that's from a team or anything like that. I think people generally really like cards, and you can do many very cool things with them. Another idea that's extremely easy to recreate is a location map. In this situation here, we basically created a location story map that's basically showcases each stadium that hosted an Olympic game during the Tokyo Olympics. You can create exactly the same things, for this year's World Cup, and visualize stadiums in Qatar or locations where each game is going to be played. Any kind of information that might be useful to visualize in a map with the coordinates. And here we've provided the help doc, but I'm also going to demonstrate very quickly on how you can create that. Apologies. Basically, if we go to our template chooser and scroll down just a little bit, here under marker map, you can see that we have a starting point that's basically a photo marker map. And if I click on it, these are some landmarks in London, but basically you can again use the same exact very blueprint to replace these landmarks with your information. All you need is a latitude and longitude coordinates and an image that you can just provide. You can even provide a public URL. It doesn't have to be a Flourish uploaded on Flourish, but if you decide, you can just right click and click upload file on any cell to do that. Once you do it, literally your visualization will be recreated in a matter of minutes. And to spice up things even a little bit more, you can actually add it into a story. The story has this very cool option that it actually remembers, kind of locks your position on the map onto view. So for example, if I focus on the Tower of London, let's imagine that's a stadium in Qatar, and then I duplicate the slide and move somewhere else, such as Hyde Park, for example, you will see this beautiful transition between both landmarks that I've created. So this is a very cool idea to kind of introduce the World Cup and basically begin your sports coverage with that if you're willing to. Another option is, of course, the timeline, as mentioned. Timeline, again, very easy to create. It supports lots of content. Here, for example, we have added interesting facts about the most viewed Wimbledon events in recent history to celebrate the Wimbledon tournament. And extremely easy and very engaging way to basically provide a historical view of your of anything that you're visualizing. Last but not least, I'm going to showcase one more type of map. This is our projection map template that basically is, of course, slightly different than the photo marker map that we've just seen. Here, we are providing some sort of an overview of the tournament history so far. And basically, our regions and our countries are visualized, colored according to the number of appearances in the World Cup, whereas those little dots shows us the number of goals that each country has scored during the since the beginning of the tournament. And to make things a bit easier for the viewer as well, we've added this into a story, and we have provided an interesting fact that at least I found interesting in the story captions here. So people can actually, first of all, point their attention to a specific part of our map. And second of all, they can have very interesting and summarized information, whether it's in the caption or in an open pop-up. It's really up to you. And it really does take very little effort to create such a stunning map that might be very interesting for people who are just refreshing their knowledge in terms of the World Cup or any other sports tournament. To basically summarize our metadata part of our webinar, you can hear some ideas that you can use. So for anything team players and locations and things like that, the cards is always a good idea to provide any sort of content. For locations, you can use a marker map, which you can select from our starting points in the template chooser. You can visualize important events with the timeline, and you can provide some historical and overview context with a world map. Hoping that was useful. But without further ado, we're actually going to move into our animated charts here at Flourish. So we cannot possibly talk about sports, and especially football, without mentioning probably the two most popular templates here at Flourish. Those are our bar chart phrase and our line chart phrase. And the chances are, if you're just very beginner here at Flourish, maybe this chart type is something that you have seen regardless of whether you've used Flourish or not. The racing bar chart is an extremely popular and super I love the bar chart phrase, a great template in my opinion, and there is a reason why. It is a very engaging way to basically show progress, to rank hires, to show ranks, whether you're choosing from highest to lowest, and things like this. And in this, and of course, you need to have your data over time. So in this visualization, for example, we can see that the total goals of since the beginning of the World Cup were more than 2,500. And we see that Brazil scored the highest number of goals in the history of the World Cup. We can also see that by using nice coloring, we're coloring by regions, we can see that the battle for World Cup dominance is in the hands of Americas and Europe. And things like that. You can see this visualization in our blog. If you haven't, please do. I think it's a fun way to showcase football stats. Now we're focusing on our the bar chart race's distant cousin, which is the line chart race. Here, what you're actually seeing on the screen is an example created by one of our users, Transfermarkt, which are a Germany-based website that focuses on sports and football stats. And they have created this absolutely stunning line chart race that basically focuses on, of course, Messi and Ronaldo. We really wanted to showcase this example for multiple different reasons, but the main reason is that basically this is one of the best use cases for us to see how a background image can really make your chart pop. The second thing that I really enjoy about this particular line chart races and bar chart races is that they're really good on social media. And we have shared the social media of Transfermarkt, particularly their reels, where you can really see, first of all, their brand identity and how much it stands out. And of course, second, how beautiful the line chart and bar chart races can be on social media. So please do take a look. You're going to have, of course, access to these slides at the end of the session. So yeah, then please feel free to explore a little bit more. Of course, a very obvious question might be, okay, so in which case should I use a line chart race? In which case should I use a bar chart race? There are plenty of differences, of course, between the two chart types, as of course there is a difference between a bar and a line, regardless of whether it's a racing chart or not, but very Flourish specific and yeah, quite relevant is that the bar chart race only works when it uses cumulative data. Whereas the line chart race could, of course, has non-cumulative one. To just emphasize a little bit more on this point is that basically here in our bar chart race example, you can see that the number of goals that Brazil has scored over the years just keeps growing. It never goes backwards and forwards. And this is an obvious example of cumulative data. In comparison, the line chart race is really good to showcase how much a particular participant of your race has earned over a point of time, or has I don't know, maybe it has changed its fortune, or maybe it has changed its rank if you're choosing to showcase ranks instead of actual numbers. But basically, of course, the line chart race, you can see here that we're seeing upwards and downward trends, whereas in the bar chart race, this is not possible. And to make things very concise and very simple, this is the main difference that you need to be aware of the line chart race and bar chart races. Of course, then if you are a little bit more familiar with Flourish, these are really Flourish specific things, such as which template supports scores and ranks, and which template supports highest and lowest filtering and things like this. But for to avoid any further confusion or maybe just overwhelming with information, I will just focus on the type of data, because this is what could potentially break your bar chart race. We're on our actual fourth tip of today's session, which is how to map out the route to finals with the sports template. Here at Flourish, we do have two templates that are very sports specific. One of them is the sports template that you're seeing right now here on the right, and the second one is a sports race template, which is very appropriate for when you're trying to visualize Olympic sports, for example. In today's session, we're going to showcase the sports template, because this is, as you can see here, is a great way to visualize formations and lineups. And of course, we do know that formations are basically such a crucial part of the football game, and sometimes teams go ballistic and they choose a very weird, very extraordinary formation, and that might not be a default thing that the usual team players will go for. And if you would like to visualize some very specific formations, very customizable, we hear you, and we're going to show you how to do this with this template. What are we going to do now is we're going to head back to our template chooser, and we're going to choose our lineup starting point here of our sports template. In addition, we're going to go to the data tab of the template, and we're going to provide a custom X and Y position of each of our players. So we make sure that basically each of our points here on the field, on the pitch, has its own customized position, and it's exactly where we want them to be. So I am just going to go back to my template chooser here. I'm going to go to a new visualization and scrolling. Here, I'm going to choose my lineup starting point. Now, I find this blueprint, maybe the red is a little bit too harsh for my eyes. So I'm very quickly just going to change the background colors of both the players and the pitch. I hope nobody minds. And here under the dots, I'm just going to disable the image blending mode so we can actually see our players. I just want to emphasize something that for our starting point, we have selected obviously the Liverpool formation, but for the purpose of this visualization, I'm only going to showcase kind of the logic behind the X and Y positions. I am going to ignore our football players completely. So if you see Becker somewhere here in the middle out of nowhere, please do ignore that. But basically, now that we have customized the beginning, our pitch and our players, we can actually start customizing how the visualization is actually working. Once you head to the player section in the template chooser, you can see that basically you can choose between default formations or positions from data. We're going to go to positions from data, but first I just want to give you like a very quick overview of the default, because this is something that you might actually be completely sufficient for your chart. For default formations, you can actually start building them from the top or from the bottom. At this point here, we have chosen a bottom start formation, which is like 1-4-3-3, and you can see it 1-4 and 3-3. You can choose between three different types of formations. And of course, you can choose to build them from the top, regardless of which type of formation you're choosing from. On the other hand, you can also provide coordinates as what are we, this is exactly what are we going to do in a second in our data tab. And in order for this to work, of course, you need to choose positions from data. Now here in the data tab, you can see that basically we have very basic information, such as the name of our players, the images of our players, as well as the team that could be used for filters if we want to visualize different team formations. But what am I going to do is I'm just going to insert two columns. I'm going to call one of my column X position, and the other one is going to be Y position. And here in the data tab, I'm just going to bind both on its relevant places. And as you can see, I don't know if you managed to see in our preview window, but basically, because at the moment, there is absolutely no data in those two columns, but they're still bound, the template basically piles our players in the corner of our pitch. If I am formatting, I'm starting the formation from the top, it will pile them at the top and vice versa. Now, to kind of understand the logic and how this template was built when using custom formations, you need to keep in mind a couple of things. The X position basically affects where on a line is the player positioned, further on the left or further on the right, whereas the Y position basically, of course, it has a role in their vertical position, so whether they're further on the top or further at the bottom. For the X position, it's really easy to remember that the X positions could vary between 0, which is furthest on the left, and 4, which is furthest on the right. So to demonstrate that, I'm just going to give a different positions to my first 5 players here. So you can see the different 5 formations. And actually, what am I going to do also is I am going to include the extra info, the X position and Y positions in the pop-ups. So it's actually easier for us to see their X and Y positions. And here you can see it's actually the third row from the top. The X position is 4. This X position is 3. This X position is 2, 1, and 0. And I'm just gonna showcase like that. Then, of course, if you are willing to be more precise, you can do something like 2.5 and things like that, if you're really willing to be super specific. The Y position, on the other hand, goes a different in different numbers, but it's again sometimes between 0 and 6 or 0 and 8, and that actually depends on your aspect ratio of your pitch here and how much is your margin. So if something doesn't look particularly correct, you can always adjust these settings like that. And also you can basically see that under our players, under our pitch here, you can choose whether you would like half a football pitch or a full football pitch. As opposed in here, you can of course choose the width and the color and things like that. So basically, if you would like to visualize the team the way it is right now, basically all you need to do is make sure that the X position and the Y positions are in accordance with each other. Usually this could be our goalkeeper to start with. So for example, if we want our goalkeeper to has like some sort of a mid position, that could be something like 3.5, which is our kind of mid for this visualization. So if we position the goalkeeper and make sure that the X position and the Y position is exactly where we want them, so in this case it will be 3.5 and 0, then we can start building up from there. So sometimes if we would like to have if we would like to have players that are right on top within a single line, right above our goalkeeper, what we can do is we can use his coordinates to make sure that they're right where we want them to be. To make things a bit easier, I'm going to leave just 4 players here. And I'm going to use this player as my goalkeeper, so it's just right in the middle. And then I am going to start building. For example, I want the Y position to be just 1 unit above my goalkeeper, so I can choose everybody to be just 1 above, meaning that they're all positioned here. Maybe that's a bit too tight with the labels. Let's do them 2. Like so. And if we would like to spread them further away from each other, what we can do is we can select one of our players to be 3.5, one of our players to be 5.5, and one of our players to be 1.5. So they're at an equal distance and things are a little bit more symmetrical and organized. So in long story short, this is kind of the way that the sports template is working. Generally, you can just think of it in a way as a scatter plot, where you can just need to double check the X and the vertical and horizontal position of our visualizations, and just play around with it and make sure that what are you seeing on the screen is what you would like to create as a formation. I do realize that this template is very specific and it could be a little bit hard to understand and wrap your hand around it in the very beginning, but here on this slide we have provided a help doc which you can follow. And basically here I've tried to kind of follow just a simple formation which we found online, and I am providing numbers which I'm hoping might be more helpful for you to create your custom formations. And I've already been here, we've already known this. Basically, I'm going to finish off with our final tip for today's session, which is more of a generic tip which we will give to everyone that basically is involved in data visualization, regardless of whether that's sports or not. But basically, we really recommend keeping things very simple and digestible. And thankfully, here at Flourish, we really try to customize charts up to an extent where you can really get an idea of what are you looking at from the get-go. In this situation, for example, here we see a simple column chart that basically shows the percentage of goals scored after the 90th minute. This is again basically in connection with the late goal trend that we've discussed with our scatter plot. And we see the percentage of goals scored during each World Cup. And of course, interestingly enough, Russia, so like the World Cup 4 years ago, so the most late goals in the tournament's history. And the good thing about this chart is that basically, whenever you're starting with your visualization and you just look at it for the first time, you can actually point the user's attention to exactly the specific part of your chart. That could be done with a colored headers, as we did here. In Flourish, we also call it Riley Legend after one of our ex-colleagues. Basically, of course, this colored header basically serves the purpose of a legend. Axis highlights, it's exactly the same thing what I showed with the scatter. Basically, you can always choose whether to visualize and highlight things between your x-axis or y-axis, and things like color overrides, where you can color individual bars or lines to bring the attention to this specific chart. This makes your visualizations a little bit better, super quickly, and very efficiently as well. And we keep repeating the same thing. If you're often attending our webinars and read our blogs, we sometimes give very similar tips again and again. But there is a reason for this, and it's because this is extremely important and quite crucial. I really would like to go into details about that, but I am aware that we have about 5 minutes. So instead, I have just provided our help docs here, and these help docs are about the annotations on the axes, colors, and every color specific things that you can do within Flourish, and stories as well, in case you would like to create animated stories in the same way as we've done here. And again, this is our blog post that basically uses quite a few of those examples that we've just showcased here. I think we are there. This was an extremely, hopefully not very overwhelming session, but full with quite a lot of examples. And I hope it was useful for everybody. Of course, now we're not finished yet. We're going to spend some time answering any questions you might have, but I just want to focus on a couple of things. Here's some extra help docs that I've thought might be useful for you to get started with your football coverage. And also you can take a look at some other customer examples that have been created with Flourish when it comes to sports, such as Continentalists, a very cool analysis about the Tokyo Olympics. This is a very nice data visualization newsroom, and they make stunning examples. Here you can see a scatter, and at the very bottom, if I remember, yes, exactly. Here is one more example of our cards template, and MVP reporting basically created a stunning scrollytelling. This is one of our premium features to analyze the March Madness viewership from, I think, a couple of years ago. But this is one very cool and stunning way to focus the attention on any sports coverage you might have. So please do take a look at these examples.